There's no fool like an old fool, and you will be sure that I am one of those when I tell you I'm about to discuss with you the issue of same-sex marriage. The plebiscite will bring both cheers and hatred. Many professed Christians will deny their Lord by homophobia, but Christians know that God loves everybody in the world, respectable or disreputable, in jail or out, transgender or so-called straight. Luke chapter 6 says that God is kind to the evil and to the unthankful. Well, lots of professed Christians are in those categories, and many of them will be guilty of homophobia when the same-sex marriage plebiscite comes up. I do have to tell you that for all the thousands of years of civilization, marriage only meant one thing: the union of one man and one woman, and for life. That doesn't mean that same-sex marriage must be wrong, but it does mean that there is a question that we must ask. I want to recommend to you a recent medical journal. This is the Medical Republic that came out August 10 of 2016. It has a splendid article on transgender people. It does not use the word homosexual or lesbian, but it points out that any person who identifies with a sex opposite to that which is on his birth certificate can be classified as transgender. But the article here is very good indeed, because it points out what all biologists know and all Christians should know, that the majority of people who fall in the category of transgender did not choose it. That's vital to understand. They found themselves so. 60 years ago, at night time, I was visited by a young man of whom I thought very highly. He'd made a beautiful little pram for my tiny daughter to put her dolls in, to push around the district. He was in every way decent, but I found that night that he was homosexual. Not a practicing one, but homosexual in desires and tendencies. Desi said to me, "We've lived at college in the boys' hall. What if you had lived in the girls' hall? What would that have been like for you?" He said, "That's what it was like for me in the boys' hall." I have been privileged to know others of transgender ilk and have made friends there, and many of them carry a very heavy burden. And any professed Christian who engages in homophobia is denying his Lord and is carrying a bigger burden than the one those they criticise are supposed to carry. According to this article, overall, a vast proportion of transgender people suffer from discrimination, marginalisation, and even physical violence. No Christian can agree with those things. I want to read you from the very best book in print on the transgender issue. It's this one by Robert A.J. Gagnon. This man loves people of the transgender category, and he desires to save them from unnecessary pain. And although I don't like reading when I should be just speaking, I have to read you from this book. I'm going to read to you from Gagnon's book, beginning on page 471. He mentioned a classic work called Homosexuality and the Politics of Truth, written by psychiatrist Jeffrey Satanova, who argued that one way to determine the moral desirability of homosexuality is to examine the medical facts. What he asks, would society think if a relative, a friend or a colleague had a condition that is routinely, even if not always, associated with these problems? A significantly decreased likelihood of establishing or preserving a successful marriage, a 5 to 10 year decrease in life expectancy, chronic, potentially fatal liver disease, hepatitis, inevitably fatal esophageal cancer, pneumonia, internal bleeding, serious mental disabilities, many of which are irreversible, a much higher than usual incidence of suicide, a very low likelihood that its adverse effects can be eliminated unless the condition itself is eliminated. There's only 30% likelihood of being eliminated through lengthy, often costly and very time-consuming treatment in an otherwise unselected population of sufferers, although a very high success rate among highly motivated, carefully selected sufferers. We can add 4 qualifications to the unnamed conditions. First, even though its origins are influenced by genetics, the condition is, strictly speaking, rooted in behaviour. Second, individuals who have this condition continue the behaviour in spite of the destructive consequences of doing so. Third, many with this condition deny they have any problem at all, violently resist all attempts to help them. And fourth, these people who resist help tend to socialise with one another, sometimes exclusively, and form a kind of subculture. Obviously, Satanova states, society should consider the condition worth treating and worth persuading other members of society to avoid the behaviour that brings on these terrible medical risks. Now note what it says next. Then Satanova lets his reader in on a secret. The condition he was alluding to was not homosexuality, but alcoholism. The medical side of homosexuality is worse. And then Gagnon lists the medical problems for the practicing transgender male. A significantly decreased likelihood of establishing or preserving a successful marriage, a 25 to 30 year decrease in life expectancy, chronic, potentially fatal liver disease, infectious hepatitis, which increases the risk of liver cancer, inevitably fatal immune disease, including associated cancers, frequently fatal rectal cancer. It doesn't say this, but it is a fact that homosexual practice results in 60 times the likelihood for cancer of the anus. 60. Multiple bowel and other infectious diseases are much higher than usual incidence of suicide. A very low likelihood that its adverse effects can be eliminated unless the condition itself is, and at least 50% likelihood of being eliminated through lengthy, often costly and very time-consuming treatment. Then he finishes with these lines: the additional qualifications given for alcoholism also hold true for the transgender group. A behaviour with a partial and indirect genetic component. Participation in the behaviour despite its destructive effects. Participants rigorously deny there's a problem and the formation of a subculture. Yet despite the parallels between the two conditions, what is striking today are the sharply different responses to them. I recommend to you this splendid book by a scientist, a physician who loves those who carry the burden of being a transgender person. Don't forget it. The Bible and Homosexual Practice by Robert A.J. Gagnon. Now I have something else to say to you. There's a much greater authority than the ones we've quoted. Even the most bigoted people in the world will not describe Jesus Christ as a bigot. What did he say on this matter of same-sex marriage? Well, he talked about marriage in Matthew 19, and he said marriage was a union between one man and one woman for a lifetime. Now, my friends, nobody can deny that the most influential person who ever lived on this planet was Jesus Christ. And never once has anything that he said been found to be false. That cannot be said of Plato, cannot be said of Aristotle, cannot be said of what Julius Caesar wrote, cannot be said of what Cicero wrote. It cannot be said of any other author in the world. But no error has ever been found in the teachings of Jesus. He loves the transgender group, according to Luke 6, and I'm greatly encouraged by this. He loves even the evil and the ungrateful, for I fall in that category. Dear friend, he loves you. You cannot be a homophobic